It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown. Let's go.
The reason education sucks is the same reason that it will never, ever be fixed. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The big, wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. Politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pocket. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. A population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They want obedient workers because they own this fucking place. It's a big club. And you ain't in it.
Kanye West, notoriously, obviously, when he tweeted out, I'm about to go DEFCON 3 on some Jews, and the media freaked out, and people in the Jewish community were understandably very scared, not knowing what he meant. And I very much abstained from speaking much about the issue because people were so emotional that people couldn't hear, even if I had shared. And even when Kanye did share that he was speaking about specific people in Hollywood that he believed were coming after him and were trying to control him. Rabbi Shmuley Boteach was threatening me, and it wasn't just him, it was also his daughter, and messaging me saying, don't mess with Jews. Very bizarre stuff, and they have not stopped, to be clear. And so what I believe is something that should be explored is whether or not what's happening is that just like within all communities, there are gangs, right? Gangs can form, we understand this. In the Black community, we've got the Bloods and we've got the Crips. Well, imagine if the Bloods and the Crips were doing horrific things, murdering people, controlling people with blackmail. And then every time a person spoke out about it, the Bloods and the Crips would call those people racist. Would get the media to say those people were racist. Any person that was talking about a specific gang, a small group of people, would say, oh my God, no. That's like slavery. You can't at all say anything bad about the Bloods and the Crips. And the entire Black community believed it and was scared and thought, oh my God, like, is slavery actually coming back? But what if that is what is happening right now in Hollywood, if there is just a very small ring of specific people who are using the fact that they are Jewish to shield themselves from any criticism? It's food for thought, right? And I think, again, there have been enough people that are speaking out about a ring in Hollywood, also a ring potentially in DC, that we should start to ask those questions. All of us, Black, Spanish, Jewish, Chinese, Japanese, all Americans should want answers because this appears to be something that is quite sinister.
Is that any surprise?
No.
Bro.
There seems to be a tough relationship between Jewish music executives and Black performers.
Yeah, here's why. We designed everything they do. That do-rag that 50 Cent had, that's Jew designed.
Really?
We choose all that shit. They run it by us, and then we chose we do market research, and we just figure out what's the best. Milli Vanilli, it was all Jews who were singing this stuff.
Right.
We've just like planned it, but we know we're not cool looking. And also, yeah, we kill it in the management industry. You know why? Why comedy managers and agents are Jews? Why because you need to have someone funneling you money the first 3 years. You're not making any money.
In modern Jewish history, and it begins with 3 words. Dear Lord Rothschild.
Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet.
It's like, you know, there's that old expression, to learn who rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize. You know, people say that's Voltaire. It wasn't Voltaire, but that's a good heuristic. If you can't criticize somebody, it probably means they have power over you. Like if you go to your job, you can't criticize your boss. Why? Because your boss can fire you. If you're a kid, you can't say F you to your parents. Why? Because your parents are your boss. They can ground you. Similarly, if I go out tomorrow and say the Illuminati runs the world, no problems. If I go out tomorrow and say white people run the world, no problems. If I go out and say, the Trilateral Commission, no problem. China, no problem. If I go out tomorrow and say, hey, Jews run the world, big problem. That's what happened to Kanye.
This got the Jeffrey Epstein of the music and entertainment industry. The new lawsuit that just dropped against Diddy is massive, and it has photos, it has videos, it names names, and there's so much here that it's never gonna fit into a single video. So I'm gonna do a quick overview in this video, and then I'm gonna do a couple of parts breaking down all the different aspects of what's come out so far. We're talking crime scenes, we're talking photo evidence of celebrities like Cuba Gooding Jr., we're talking record label executives, we're talking hidden cameras in every room of the house, getting recordings of celebrities, executives, politicians at parties with celebrities and underage girls, with drinks being spiked, with drugs. This goes all the way back to the murder of Tupac and Biggie. We're talking about the entire rap and hip hop industry and the whole music industry at large. So how does a 24-year-old found a massive record label on his own? Well, when you dig further, you realize it wasn't on his own. It was with the help of Clive Davis, his mentor. And the further into it all you dig, you realize that Clive Davis came out as gay later on, and there's a lot of rumors that him and Diddy were in a relationship throughout this time. This is gonna come up over and over and over, just by chance, but it leads you to people like Leor Cohen, who might be the most influential person in the last 100 years of music, because he ran Def Jam and made Jay-Z who he is, including Redman, Method Man, DMX, Ja Rule, Ludacris. But it doesn't stop with rap music. We got Bon Jovi, Mariah Carey, Shania Twain, Elvis Costello, Ashanti, Nickelback, Slipknot, Sum 41, The Killers, Slayer. But then we've also got his protege, Julie Greenwald, that got elevated through this merger that he brokered and managed the Black Keys, Bruno Mars, Death Cab for Cutie, Jason Mraz, Kid Rock, Lupe Fiasco, Wiz Khalifa. That would be this Julie Greenwald. And then we've got Lucian Grange, the CEO of Universal Music Group. He's the one that is directly implicated and named in this lawsuit. It is alleged that he attended these parties with underage girls and with sex workers, and he knew that they were spiking drinks, etc., etc. But when you're talking about Diddy, you gotta also talk about Justin Bieber, who was managed by Scooter Braun, along with Kanye West, Ariana Grande, Demi Lovato, etc. Scooter Braun is a really big player in the modern music industry.
The Jewish community and the black community, we should be together. Jews and blacks we shouldn't fight, there shouldn't be tension. Jews and blacks should get together and get whitey.
What they can do now is they can translate like Hitler's speech. They've got Hitler's speeches that Hitler gave in German. And you get to see it in English, and you're like, oh.
The German nation does not wish its interests to be determined and controlled by any foreign nation. France to the French, England to the English, America to the Americans, and Germany to the Germans. We are resolved to prevent the settlement in our country of a strange people which was capable of snatching for itself all the leading positions in the land, and to oust it, for it is our will to educate our own nation for these leading positions. We have hundreds of thousands of very intelligent children of peasants and of the working classes. We shall have them educated. In fact, we have already begun, and we wish that one day they, and not the representatives of an alien race, may hold the leading positions in the state together with our educated classes. Above all, German culture, as its name alone shows, is German and not Jewish. and therefore its management and care will be entrusted to members of our own nation.
When you see those things, those speeches, I thought it was all like, we gotta exterminate the Jews. That's not what he said.
So literally, we opened a center in Silicon Valley back in 2017. And the woman who runs it, she's an ex-Facebook executive. I have software engineers and data scientists working at ADL. We're monitoring all this stuff, and we're working with all the platforms, by the way, Google and YouTube and Meta and Twitter and Reddit and Steam and Amazon, all these companies. From like Apple to Zoom, we work with all of them.
Who are behind the establishing of the State of Israel. It is the family of the Rothschilds. On their own official website, they brag how they are the ones who financed the rebuilding of Israel. So who are the Rothschilds? And why did they spend billions of dollars to invest in the building of a new political and military state of Israel? The Rothschilds are amongst the most wealthy people in the world. Their fortune is estimated to be several trillions of dollars. That is several thousands of billions of dollars. That makes them basically the most powerful people in the whole financial and banking system of this world. They operate, for example, from within the city of London, not to be confused with London City. London City is the city that we all know. It is London, where people live and where tourists visit. The city of London, however, is a small area of 1 square mile within the heart of London City. The city of London is the financial center of the entire world. And there is something highly significant about the city of London. This small area of 1 square mile is a sovereign state. It is not subject to the laws of England, nor the United Kingdom, nor the royal family. On the contrary, the City of London actually rules supreme over them. The City of London is the continuation of what we all know as the British Empire.
Why the secrecy? Well, who were these men? Senator Nelson Aldrich, who was the Republican whip in the Senate. Aldrich was a business associate of J.P. Morgan. He was the father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller, Jr., which means, of course, that eventually he became the grandfather of Nelson Rockefeller, our former vice president. The second person at the meeting was Abraham Piatt Andrew, who was Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. Frank Vanderlip was there. He was the president of the National City Bank of New York, which was the largest and the most powerful of all the banks in the country. Representing the financial interests of William Rockefeller, Henry Davison was there. He was the senior partner of the J.P. Morgan Company. Charles Norton was present. He was the president of the First National Bank of New York, which was another one of the giants. There was Benjamin Strong, who was the head of J.P. Morgan's Bankers Trust Company. And finally, there was Paul Warburg, who was probably the most important of all the men there because of his knowledge of banking as it was practiced in Europe. Paul Warburg was one of the wealthiest men in the world. He was a representative of the Rothschild banking dynasty in England and France, and these are the men that sat around a table on Jekyll Island and created the Federal Reserve System. They represented approximately 1/4 of the wealth of the entire world.
And the men on the Titanic were opposed to a central bank. They had to die.
This is Jekyll Island, where in 1910, representatives from the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Morgans, and other private bankers gathered secretly to draft the legislation that would create the Federal Reserve. I found it revealing that in the same year the Federal Reserve was founded, 1913, the Internal Revenue Service was also established. An income tax was then instigated so you and I would have to pay the politicians' debt, plus interest, to the bankers.
The problem is we have a privately owned central bank system in the United States disguised as a government-owned system. Now, if you look in the telephone book here in the Washington, D.C. area, you look up for Federal Reserve in the blue government pages, it's not there. It's in the white pages right next to Federal Express. It's a privately owned central bank.
He would talk and he started laughing. He said, Aaron, what do you think women's liberation was about? And I said, I'm pretty conventional thinking about it at that point. I said, I think it's about women having the right to work, getting equal pay with men, just like they won the right to vote, you know? And he started to laugh. He said, you're an idiot. And I said, why am I an idiot? He said, let me tell you what that was about. We, the Rockefellers, funded that. We funded Women's League, you know? And we're the ones who got all over the newspapers and television, the Rockefeller Foundation. He says, and you wanna know why? He said, there were two primary reasons. And they were, one reason was we couldn't tax half the population before women's lib. And the second reason was, now we get the kids in school at an early age. We can indoctrinate the kids how to think. It breaks up the family. The kids start looking at the state as the family, as the school, as the officials, as their family, not as the parents teaching them.
John D. Rockefeller in the late 1800s, and you have a big problem. It's the Industrial Revolution, and you have this giant oil empire, but you simply can't find enough wage slaves to keep the wheels turning. Unlike today where you can just make a job post online and a bunch of educated laborers will come flocking your way, back then most of America was rural. Most of America lived simple lives on farms. They were homeschooled, they went to schools ran by churches. They didn't know how to work a factory job or at an oil refinery. They weren't conditioned to clock in and out. So you needed a way to educate the population on a massive scale so they could come work for you. However, we don't want to educate them too much now, do we? Remember, knowledge is dangerous. There's a reason why slaves weren't allowed to learn how to read or write. So if you're gonna educate the masses, you have to tread very carefully. Teach them too much and they'll become too ambitious, too independent. They'll think for themselves. They'll become your competitors. Instead, you want to teach them just enough so they can keep your empire running with a happy, obedient smile on their face. So what did you do? You helped pioneer the American public school system. All of a sudden, every parent could just send their kids off to a free public school funded by good old Rockefeller. To the rest of the world, you looked like a saint. You were giving free education to all those uncivilized, ignorant Americans. But you and I know the truth. By dangling the prospect of free education in front of millions of American parents, you were able to trick them into relinquishing their children to the state. That way, for 8 to 12 years of a child's most formative years, you get to condition them to be exactly who you want them to be. You get to decide what they learn and don't learn. You get to decide how they see the world. You get to condition them to be scared, to be fearful, to be obedient, to not chase after their dreams, to accept mediocrity. You get to teach them that if they don't follow orders exactly to the T, they are a failure.
I can't believe it. B is for bitch!
Because these are the traits that make for a good laborer. And it worked. By giving every American access to free, standardized public education, you were able to solve the labor problem in America. Now, every generation that came after it would go into school filled with innocence, creativity, and joy, and they would come out of school as an obedient worker that doesn't want to rock the boat. Workers who are perfectly happy making their employers rich.
But the memorization of monotonous dead facts and training children to master repetitious behavior. For the greater part of their day, everything the child says must match the interest of their school teachers. Their behavior must coincide with a set policy and a set regulation. They cannot use the bathrooms without permission. If they wish to speak, they must raise their hands. And after every hour or so, a bell rings and everyone must move to it. It couldn't be any more slave-like. And this type of training becomes a ritual for the child. It becomes the plot background for their television shows and books, or the ideology taught to them by a teacher or a parent. An entire monoculture is being developed here, stripping children of their power to cause trouble for the state at an early age, training them to be good servants of the politically correct. Their environment is much like a prison, by the population lacking any ability to check the authority of the warden. The process becomes a matter of rubber stamping. They have no control over their entire lives, which is directly related to youth violence, because the only control they have is between each other. Mandatory schooling produces children who are either terrified of the tyranny of others or have been raised to perpetually exploit the conditions of others. It's just like the prison system. Forced cohabitation. The child's presence in certain buildings and their engagement in state-regulated behavior is under penalty of imprisonment. An entire army of truancy officers have been hired to make sure that no child is on the other side of the bars. At the end of 18 years of coercive state authority, the child is released into the world.
In the 19th century,
Oil was used to mainly lubricate steam engines, and being the second most abundant resource on Earth, it wasn't a valuable resource until it was discovered that it could be used as fuel, and the man leading the charge, John Rockefeller. Well, to increase profit, Rockefeller had to make it seem like oil was a scarce resource, sending his scientists to the 1892 Geneva Convention to put up the front that oil contained hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. Therefore, it had to have come from something organic. Thus, the term fossil fuels. However, it was never actually proven that oil came from fossils, and that while oil rigs drill up to 35,000 feet, a fossil has never been found below 16,000 feet. On top of that, Rockefeller donated over $180 million to the General Education Board, and now every textbook states that oil is a fossil fuel.
So in 1872, Rockefeller bought up, shut down, or bankrupt 90% of the oil companies. Our good old Constitution came into place, and in 1911, the Supreme Court found Rockefeller in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act and split Standard Oil into 34 independent companies. So they said, you can't have the monopoly on this, you're done. You think that changed who he was? No. He promised to bankrupt America. At that very same time, they were learning how to turn petrochemicals, exactly what he had at his fingertips with the oil, into pharmaceuticals. Now, John D. Rockefeller's biggest threat was natural health. So what does he do? Being the businessman he is, he donates money to the medical schools because he wants to control. And what do you do when you want to control someone? You give them money. And then he hired a guy by the name of Flexner to study the school's curriculum, to figure out what they were teaching everybody, and to persuade the government to establish allopathic medicine, which used the unnatural substances to treat diseases. This is how Western medicine was founded.
Mr. Rockefeller founded the American Cancer Society, through which he suppressed that information. John D. Rockefeller is duly credited as the founder of the pharmaceutical industry, and the reason that medical error is currently the third leading cause of death in America. This is not an indictment against doctors. More than anyone, they are under the stranglehold of the single largest lobbying power in Washington. Every year, the pharmaceutical industry spends at least twice the amount as big oil to influence laws, policies, and public perception. Thanks to Mr. Rockefeller, the architect of American monopolies, no industry has more power over our lives than Big Pharma.
Known as the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud claimed his father molested all of his siblings. Freud was a cocaine addict, as well as a pedophile advocate, who taught that children sexually lusted after their parents, and that children who reported sexual abuse by adults had either imagined or fantasized the experience. He believed that women were the problem with society, and all their problems stemmed from not having a penis. Freud's grandson, Sir Clement Freud, has been accused of molesting multiple young girls, and was suspected in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Sigmund Freud's sister, Anna Freud, whom Freud claimed was regularly molested and abused by their perverted father, gave birth to Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda. Bernays took his family's work in psychology and used it to help governments and corporations manipulate the minds of the public. Hired by the American Tobacco Company, Bernays manipulated women into buying more cigarettes by convincing them that smoking was a form of feminist liberation. During this propaganda campaign, he dubbed cigarettes torches of freedom. Thanks to Bernays and his family's twisted legacy, social engineering became big business. Modern psychology was used to exploit mankind's mental weaknesses, nurture the public's lower desires, and turn people into mindless consumers. Is it any surprise, then, that the great-nephew of Edward Bernays is none other than Mark Bernays Randolph, the co-founder and original CEO of Netflix? Does anyone really think this is a coincidence? Netflix has not only replaced network television as the premier home of pop culture, it is also continuing the degenerate, depraved social engineering of the Bernays-Freud legacy. In 13 Reasons Why, Netflix was accused of romanticizing suicide during a recent increase of teenage suicides. In The Devil Next Door, they were accused of rewriting history to deceive viewers into believing that Poland was responsible for establishing Nazi death camps. In The First Temptation of Christ, Jesus Christ is depicted as a homosexual. And a Texas grand jury indicted Netflix for depicting child sex in the movie Cuties. Netflix and chill, the new preferred method for brainwashing the masses. Brought to you by one of the most depraved, degenerate families of the modern era.
After this, you will never look at Netflix in the same way. In the 1920s, Big Tobacco was upset that smoking was a male activity. So they brought in Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, who happens to be the nephew of Sigmund Freud. Wait until you see where this goes. Bernays paired smoking cigarettes with feminism. He would organize a parade and have a world-famous feminist brand cigarettes torches of freedom. He put pictures of girls smoking cigarettes in magazines and newspapers all over the country. He even got doctors to claim that smoking aids in digestion. Trust the science. Bernays literally wrote a book called Propaganda and another book called Crystallizing Public Opinion. This is where things get really creepy. This is Mark Randolph, the founder of Netflix. Mark Bernays Randolph. Yeah, the nephew of these guys.
Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. There are people in our government, a rogue outfit, whatever, I'm not sure, who are actually behind these terrorist acts. And the reason they're behind the terrorist acts is so they can pass bills like the Patriot Act. And the reason the congressmen and the senators vote for these stupid bills, stupid by our terms and our definition, is because many of them have been set up and framed through sex and drugs.
The way the country's running, we should assume the politicians are being sexually blackmailed. How can you explain the open border or the record spending and all the BS that comes out of that town? Well, Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee says sexual blackmail in the House, just a part of the deal.
And by the way, whatever, that's all I'll say.
By the way.
No, I mean, people don't say that because they're worried about getting punished. They're worried about someone putting kiddie porn on their computer.
Right.
Members of Congress are terrified of the intel agencies. I'm not guessing at that. They've told me that, including people on the intel committee, including people who run the intel committee, the people whose job it is to oversee and keep in line these enormous, secretive agencies whose budgets we can't even know. They're black budgets. They're the parents. The agencies are the children. They're afraid of the agencies. That's not compatible with democracy. Democracy is a really simple system, even representative democracy like ours. The people rule. They do so through elections. They express their preference through voting. They send their people to the capital city to run the government on their behalf. Whenever you have unelected people who are not accountable to anyone making the biggest decisions, you don't have a democracy. You have something else, another system. I would call it a tyranny or whatever you want to call it. It's not a democracy. So that's like super obvious. It's playing out in front of everyone and no one cares and no one does anything about it. And I think the reason is because they're threatened. And if you look at the committee chairmen who allow this shit to happen year after year, they're all, and I don't know, people say, oh, they're compromised, they're being blackmailed. I don't have evidence of that, but I know them, and they all have things to hide. I know that for a fact.
The reason that the government wanted to collect me was that after they had raided my property in 2012 in the jungle, shot my dog, abused me, destroyed $500,000 worth of my property over a bogus charge, I was pissed off. And so I donated to many secretaries within the government laptop computers, really nice ones that were preloaded with viral spyware. Within a week, the entire government computer system was under my control. I was watching, monitoring this thing. I was looking for information that they had set me up for that raid. I didn't find it. I did find out that the Minister of National Defense was the largest drug trafficker in all of Central America. The Minister of Immigration, the largest human trafficker.
We don't want to get killed by them either, so we're probably not going to share that.
But they really are issues of the construction of a new world order. That's what this is about.
As to the origin of the present Jews in Palestine, he states that those Jews derived from Eastern Europe, and many of the Jews that today live in the reconstituted state of Israel come from Eastern Europe are not descendants of the Judeans or the lost tribes of Israel, but rather descendants of the Khazars. Who are they? They were a nation most people do not even know of.
We had several other people in the country, even among the Jews, the Zionists particularly, who were against anything that was to be done if they couldn't have the whole of Palestine and everything handed to them on a silver plate so they wouldn't have to do anything. It couldn't be done. We had to take it in small doses. You can't move 5 or 6 million people out of a country and fill it up with 5 or 6 million more and expect both sets of them to be pleased.
I know this is going to sound, of course.
Because he's black.
No, guys.
Goodness.
A Jew sold it to me because I'm Jewish.
Wow.
Yeah. Straight up, I'm being honest.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be honest. Like, no funny, weird shit. Y'all run the world.
And our leaders are low-life scum that screw little girls so the Jews can screw America. That's what's happening in this country. I just said it. That's what's going on in this country. And our FBI is corrupt. The Supreme Court is corrupt. The Justice Department is corrupt. The news media is corrupt. The whole country is corrupt because we've walked away from Almighty God and we've allowed Kabbalah-practicing Jews to defile the nation. Put that video out. Go ahead and clip this video and send it out. I dare you. You won't do it because you're scared that the truth may get out to the American people. I'm had it up to here with the corruption in this country. Little children being raped for the benefit of Israel. That's all it's about, Doc. Little American children being raped for the benefit of Israel. American politicians raping little American girls to be videotaped by Israeli Mossad so that Israel can blackmail American politicians. That's the state of America today. God ought to destroy this country for what we've become.
Let me issue and control a nation's money. I care not who writes the laws. The few who understand the system will either be so interested from its profits or so dependent on its favours that there will be no opposition from that class. The way to make money is to buy when blood is running in the streets.